Thank you very much indeed, and a very good morning to everybody. I hope this year is a much better year for all of us. I'm going to very quickly work through what I would regard as a background highlight. There are perhaps 3 questions that I will seek to answer, but very, very quickly. At the end of today's session, I had craved the indulgence of the organizers that I will leave at about 9:30. But the presentation will be shared from me afterwards. Now, the 3 questions I will answer. First and foremost, where exactly is the economy in Nigeria at the moment? The second question, what will be the likely drivers of this economy, and potentially, essentially, what do we have to do? And thirdly, what do businesses have to consider as they look at the options and chart a pathway forward? So in terms of where we are, one of the key things about Nigeria is we need to understand external factors are very important in driving both internal outcomes and indeed, internal responses and internal outcomes. And so for us, there are 4 things in the external environment that we must always pay attention to. One is what's happening to international policy, be it fiscal and monetary. The second, and also regulatory. The second is international trade. A third is international capital movements. And the fourth are diaspora transfers. Those for me are the 4 key things that drive the Nigerian economy from outside of our borders. And when you look at the international environment, the prognosis is that this would be a better year than 2020 was. It's been said over and over, COVID-19, essentially, what started as a health challenge has morphed into an economic challenge, has since then, in some countries, become a humanitarian challenge, and in some other countries, a security challenge. So where we are with that, post 2 million deaths and rising. And I would argue now that 2021 will, at least the early parts of 2021, and some think the whole of 2021, will be substantially shaped by COVID-19 and the responses to COVID-19. Yes, vaccines are now becoming available, but the challenges of rolling them out and getting jabs in arms is not going to be an easy one. As you currently know, significant parts of Europe are in lockdown. Indeed, also parts of Asia have declared an emergency around a second and in some cases a third spike. So COVID-19 remains a major issue as far as the global environment is concerned. As far as Nigeria is concerned, where we are is that we are all, in terms of the global environment, our key concern is going to be what happens to prices. I don't forecast oil prices, but if you look at the international futures market, NYMEX, for example, the prognosis is the futures market average for 2021 is about $50 a barrel. Now, that's one part of the oil story. The second part of the oil story is then going to be how much oil is Nigeria going to be able to produce. And I would argue now that the oil sector will be a major element of how 2021 turns out for Nigeria. We've seen oil prices recover, but as you all know, OPEC quota continues to restrict Nigeria's productive capacity. Now, coming to the domestic economy, essentially it's what the economists would call stagflation. Though some would argue that it might be a bit worse than stagflation in the sense that stagflation is stagnant growth and rising inflation. We certainly have rising inflation with food prices just short of 20% and overall headline inflation just short of 16%. But in addition to that, we now have a recession in play, but one from which we are now in recovery. Because if you remember, quarter 2, 2020, minus 6.1 was the shrinkage in the economy, but by quarter 3, that had dropped to about 3.4%. So we had gone beyond the trough of the reduction of the shrinking economy. We are waiting to see what quarter 4 holds. But if the data that is available from PMI is anything to go by, it does seem to suggest that quarter 4 might well have ended up even better than quarter 3. But beyond that, as I said, inflation is a major challenge. Just short of 16% for the headline and just short of 20% for the food prices. In terms of our external accounts, our external accounts weakened considerably. It doesn't matter almost on what count you look at it, whether it's in terms of capital inflows or it's in terms of our trade balance. We have a much weaker external account, running deficits across many of these trading accounts. Beyond that, on the fiscal side, Nigeria has and continues to manage the challenges arising from inadequate revenues. And those challenges have manifested in rising indebtedness and rising debt service. If revenues don't come in, borrowing is typically what happens. And by the way, borrowing is not a Nigeria-specific matter. You look around the world and you see that a lot of countries have borrowed a huge amount. Now, one of the challenges that Nigeria must respond to in 2021 and beyond is what is the utilization of what is borrowed. But we'll come back to that. The registrar in his comments said something about the budget. The budget's is now in place. It runs on a deficit of about 5.1 trillion or thereabout, which is much higher compared to the 2.7 trillion naira budget deficit that was projected for 2020. We'll still have to wait to see what the outcomes were. In terms of policy, I think the biggest challenge that we face now is how do we attain to macroeconomic stability? And what do I mean by macro stability? If you look at the numbers, I said earlier, inflation is just short of 16%. But when you look at the yields on various instruments across the short and long term, they are far, far, far below the inflation rate, which therefore means real returns are negative. And as you might expect, one would not be surprised to see a switching of assets, which, by the way, in my view, explains why the stock exchange rallied to be one of, I'm actually told it was ranked the best performing stock exchange in 2020. Essentially what we saw was a switch in assets away from fixed income because of low yields and rising inflation into the stock market. Whether that is sustainable or not remains to be seen. Now, what's going to drive 2021? The key things are as follows. First, what happens internationally, as I said earlier, is very important to Nigeria. And so the international environment. Fortunately for us, the international environment, the latest World Bank numbers review published in this about a week or thereabout ago, projects positive growth as far as the global economy is concerned. And so that's the first thing that we have to take cognizance of. In 2021, the World Bank projects a growth of 4% in the global economy. This is a marked contrast and a sharp improvement from the contraction that we are expecting to be posted to be finally confirmed for 2020. The global economy actually contracted in 2020. And so in terms of the global economy, as I said, growth is projected to return. I already spoke to you earlier, I already mentioned in my comments about oil prices averaging about a barrel. We expect that OPEC restrictions will remain in place for the whole of 2021. And therefore, for Nigeria, an interesting international environment, growth would ordinarily mean opportunities to export. But we are going to have to wait and see how COVID may or may not affect those projections. On the domestic side, there are a number of issues that we need to pay attention to in 2021. To begin with, we need to pay attention to the challenges around security. I'm not a security expert, but nonetheless, I think we are increasingly clear that Nigeria has a security challenge with which it is currently dealing. But coming back to the economics, I think a number of things are pretty clear about what will drive 2021. Again, from the international domain, I've already spoken about COVID, I've spoken about oil prices, but there's a new US administration that takes office from tomorrow. Key question is going to be, what are the policy dimensions of the new US administration and how might that affect countries like Nigeria? How will that play for us? On the domestic side, the key driver, if we have to try and achieve an improvement in confidence and in the confidence in our economy, for me, I am very, very clear that macroeconomic stability is first and foremost. For Nigeria's economy to grow, she needs investment. This economy requires massive amounts of investment. We're unlikely to achieve that investment. We will achieve that investment if we are able to get macroeconomic stability. Now, what is macroeconomic stability? It's pretty simple. We need a set of policies that are internally coherent and consistent, which enable us to bring down inflation and accelerate growth. Macro stability speaks about bringing down inflation and achieving growth. And so I would expect that at sub 16%, one of the key challenges for 2020 is how do we reduce inflation. Beyond that, I would expect that monetary policy would try and address the issues around the gap between inflation and interest rates. How quickly and how far the closure of that gap is, we will unfold as the year goes by. A third thing on the macro stability side has got to do with exchange rates and their determination. Let me make it abundantly clear. My view is a very simple one. Nigeria must adopt an exchange rate policy that allows the economy to grow. Let me make it abundantly clear. It is about using exchange rate policy to grow the economy. It is not about devaluation or no. The first key challenge around exchange rate policy is as part of ensuring confidence. If people know how exchange rates are going to be determined and how it works and how it is going to work, then they can plan accordingly and build confidence. Indeed, many countries around the world that have adopted unorthodox monetary policies, one of the key challenge or one of the key characteristics of unorthodox monetary policy in the context of macro stability is a forward guidance about where the policy authorities really want to go. So macro stability is an important element. At the sectoral level, as I said earlier, oil is going to be very important. And as I'm sure you all know, there is a petroleum industry enactment that is currently working through its way through the National Assembly. I think this is going to be an important enactment, and I hope that Nigeria is able to finally settle the controversies around PIB and get investment in the oil industry. Just to give you an example, Nigeria has $57 billion barrels of crude oil. Between 2015 and 2019, Nigeria attracted $3.5 billion of investment. Guyana has 7 billion barrels of crude oil. Between 2015 and 2019, she attracted, if I remember the figures correctly, I think it's about $40 billion or thereabout. By the way, if anybody in the press is listening, please check those figures before you publish them. Don't say Salami said. I have made the point about not being accurate about that, so please check. So for me, the PIB is going to be very important. The electricity industry will also be very important. And once you talk about the electricity industry and you talk about the oil industry, then it's about reform. What kind of reforms are we going to see? The government already achieved a measure of reform success in 2020. How do we build on those successes, and how do we move forward more swiftly and with some of the reforms that we're seeing? The other key challenge at the macro level, of course, is going to be domiciled in the fiscal. As I said earlier, slow growth is what is projected for Nigeria. Positive, even albeit slow growth, is what is projected for Nigeria. And so one of the key challenges is going to be, how does revenue react? How does government revenue react? Can it grow as the economy returns to positive growth? How fast can government revenues recover their poise so as to provide a basis or a platform for further improvements in the macro arrangements? As far as where businesses are concerned, let me put the key risks that businesses face on the table as far as I can see them. To begin with, the issues around rising costs mean that business productivity and business competitiveness will be under pressure. You can, with inflation, as I said earlier, just sub 16%, then businesses will face competitive pressures, especially from jurisdictions where inflation is so much lower. That's the first. The second, given the contraction we've seen last year, consumers are under pressure. And one of the things we have seen over the last 2 to 3 years is consumers down trading, in other words, going for value brands. And I think, in my view, this is something that we would expect to see. So what do businesses then do? I think at the heart of business success and business thinking in 2021 has to be innovation. I have always argued as an economist that inflation actually represents the size of pressure that businesses must put on their costs if they are to remain competitive. And so for me, as inflation rises, the challenge to innovation has always been a continuing one, but is now an accelerating one. And so businesses really have got to take a look at their costs, their cost profiles, and take a look at what innovations they can come up with. Beyond that, remember my point about consumers under pressure. It is not about macro or helicopter view responses. It is now about granular understanding of markets. Anybody who has no access to data, granular data, is unlikely to be able to appreciate the trends in the marketplace fast enough to be able to react. It is no longer, and I emphasize this with all, and I place all the emphasis at my command, it is no longer about consumers as a group. It is now about looking at specific buckets of consumers, understanding their pressures, understanding their characteristics, and responding accordingly. So, where am I ending all of this? Very simple. 2021 promises to be a better year than 2020. The challenges that we face at the macro level will continue to evolve. The challenges that businesses will face will also continue to evolve. But I am clear in my mind that there are significant opportunities that corporates can and must respond to if they are going to grow. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me thank you for the opportunity to present essentially a background to the conversations that are going to take place this morning, and thank the CIBN especially for the generosity of their invitation. I thank you all for your attendance this morning and your attention. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Dr. Salami, the keynote speaker, and thank you very much for extracting the economy and, of course, giving us the direction as well as what are the key drivers of the economy likely to be and what businesses should be doing. Once again, please accept our condolences. We know that you are going to leave us right now for the burial, but for this honor that you have done to this nation through this platform and your numerous activities, we know the Lord will give you the fortitude to bear the loss. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much, and good morning.
Thank you. May I quickly also invite Dr. Dr Adedoyin, the Chief Consultant of BA Adedoyin Associates. So please quickly give us the overview of the economy and the 2021 outlook before I then hand over to the moderator with the panelists to do justice to this presentation. Dr. Adedoyin, please.
Thank you so very much, Sheye. Good morning, distinguished panelists and attendees of this economic outlook session. And also a very big thank you to Doyin because he has done a very good job of the overview required. So I will just talk to a few things that will complement what Doyin has told us. And that is, yes, participants, of course, we have our slides after the session, but I will talk to just a few of them for two reasons. One is avoiding a repetition of what Doyin has already said. And then secondly, also to keep within the time limit, because more of the value we get from here, it will come from the panelists. So the question, what happened in 2020? A year of socioeconomic disruptions. And what I did here is to call a particular paragraph of a publication by the London Economist. It says, COVID-19 has not just propelled the global economy, it has changed the trajectory of the three big forces that are shaping the modern world. So what I did here is to highlight in red and also bold the key issues that I believe every organization and every government around the world we have to contend with in 2021. Globalization has more or less been truncated in the sense that the way it was progressing, it experienced a kind of massive slowdown in 2020. Digital revolution has been radically accelerated. Again, of course, especially in Nigerian banking, or let me even say banking globally, we can easily relate with that because what we expected as the digital revolution in banking that will happen in 2025 actually happened in 2020. So everything has changed. Equally, the geopolitical rivalry between America and China has intensified. Now we have no particular idea how this will shape with Biden taking office tomorrow. But from history, we can also make an assumption that there might not be any change in the direction. It's only the approach that might be different. There's also inequality that has intensified in 2020. Of course, as Doyin said earlier on, there was a slide. I don't have it here. Maybe I will include it before we share this. And that is the linkage between health crisis, economic crisis, humanitarian crisis, and security crisis. All of them coming together to extenuate inequality. And of course, climate change, which is a major issue around the globe. Now, I then went to this other thing published by McKinsey, where they also identified the issues that the world will be dealing with this year. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of lives lost, millions ill, soaring unemployment rates, food banks where they exist anyway, and then dislocation of how employees work, that is talking about remote working. And then consumer behavior has also changed significantly around the world. Supply chains at some point also tanked, and so we see that now being rebuilt up. And even what ultimately constitutes business performance, now this talks to private businesses, that's the private sector. So what would then constitute business performance? I recall early in 2020, when we began to interpret how COVID-19 might impact business, Jack May, that's of Alibaba, made a remark and said, any company that survives 2020 should regard that as profit, which means profit. If you made profit at all from 2020, that is very, very good news. But peradventure you made a loss, he said your survivor should be regarded as profit. Now, when everything is no longer what it used to be, we say it is time to rethink everything. I won't spend more time on this, but it is to bring to us the fact, the reality that Nigeria is facing. We are resource dependent, we are highly indebted, we have a large informal sector, MSMEs dominate our manufacturing, and of course, large population, then high poverty incidence. So how does this play out? Let me move on to this slide. I use this particular slide deliberately, and that is the contribution of different sectors of the economy to our GDP. Now, what it shows clearly is that economic activities are happening in every sector of this economy. And what that means also is that there are opportunities for those who watch and can also see what other people don't see. And that is why it's important to highlight this. But we see in here the dominance of agric, mining and quarrying, manufacturing, trade, ICT, and of course, real estate. Those 6 sectors together in the last 7 to 8 years in Nigeria have accounted for between 77 and 82% of our GDP. ICT was an interesting one in 2020. In the second quarter of 2020, ICT outperformed trade in terms of contribution to GDP. So it came second. But of course, trade picked up again and slightly pushed ICT to third position. And that tells you about what is unraveling in our economy. Though he made reference to this particular chart, I just said I will show us, because people argue whether our economy will recover first quarter of this year or not. But like Doyin remarked, and that is what this chart shows in my own presentation, that the economy is already on the path of recovery. But technically, that will be confirmed as soon as we have even as little as 0.0001% growth, positive. No matter how tiny it is, you're already technically out of recession. But what is more important is not being out of recession, but growth this year. And that's what I summarize here, okay? For this year, our National Bureau of Statistics expects the economy to grow by 3%. IMF expects our economy to grow by 1.7%. That's as per October, 2020 outlook. IMF will issue a fresh outlook on the 26th of January, and that is in the next 1 week, thereabout. Then the World Bank expects Nigeria's economy to grow by 1.1% this year. But in all of this, we see good prospects. I checked the data on the price of oil this morning, as at yesterday evening, close of business. The price of Nigeria's burning light was $54.39 per barrel, okay? Most projections, around the world put the general price level in 2021 at anything between $58 and $62 per barrel. Of course, though you mentioned $50 earlier on, but basically it means Nigeria's worry this year is not about price, as it were, based on all projections. But the worry is production and export, which of course, we've had to take some bit of dampening there. Now, this particular chart is important, and I want to draw attention to it because this was not something that you mentioned. And that the fact that the interplay between Nigeria's imports and exports swelled significantly in 2020. Based on the latest data available, we began now to import more than we're exporting. And that began in the second quarter of last year. So the data for second and third quarters of 2020 show clearly that Nigeria now imports more than we export. And that is a big, big risk in terms of our external sector. I have a slide here that shows the data. And you can see from 2013 till date that our monthly import bill has been rising. And of course, as at the third quarter of 2020, monthly import bill was about 1.5 trillion naira. And that equates about $3.984 billion monthly at the official exchange rate. So which means if you lay that against our external reserves, we have cover for just 9.1 months. So which of course, yes, it might be comfortable. Because minimum we expect is 6 months. But if you look also at the risks involved in financial flows between Nigeria and the rest of the world, that is quite thin. Now, let me go to, yes, the question, this is the big issue. Once I talk about this, I think I'll be done in terms of this presentation. Now, I copied this into my presentation this morning. That's why the date is showing 16th January 2018. That was 3 years ago when we had this particular outlook. And I raised an issue that what can explain the recession that Nigeria experienced in 2016. And I made the point then that it is not about whoever is in government today. It's about the defects in the structure of our economy, which rests on 5 things. And I pointed out then that our overdependence on hydrocarbons, government policy inconsistency and misalignment, preponderant corruption and rent seeking, overdependence on imports, and low national productivity. Question, we are in recession now, some 4 years after, because it started in 2020. Question is, any of these recession triggers, as identified 5 years ago, have they changed? Of course, we are still dependent on hydrocarbons. In fact, even worse, you see that in the slide I skipped earlier. Government policy inconsistency, we still see some measure of that. And I'm very sure our ambassador from NACCIMA will talk to that. For me, as an analyst, the question is, if we want to encourage domestic production of any item, we have no business bringing a policy that encourages importation of the same item. That is internal inconsistency, okay, in policy. So that is just an example of what we mean by misalignment of policies. Preponderant corruption and rent seeking. Yes, we still have that in the system. It's just that it is no longer as brazen as it was in 2015, 2016. Are we still over-dependent on imports? I just talked about that. It has not changed. And of course, productivity, very low across different sectors of the economy. So if we will therefore be talking about policy advice, these are the areas we should be looking at what to encourage government to do. Then of course, coming home to us as business people, I will skip this because we get that later. But what is the outlook for this year? Now, from the World Bank Global Economic Outlook for 2021, it says the global economy is emerging from the collapse triggered by the pandemic. The recovery is projected to be subdued. Global output is expected to expand 4% this year, but still remain more than 5% below its pre-pandemic trend. But good news, emerging markets and developing economies will grow by 5%. Nigeria belongs in that group, but Nigeria's growth is going to be very weak. Okay, so that points to us what we may expect this year. How about IMF? The latest outlook they have, there is an indication of what we may likely get from them in the next 1 week. And that is a statement credited to their chief economist. She said the ascent out of this calamity is likely to be long, likely to be uneven, and also highly uncertain. That means there are risks even to the recovery we are discussing today. Morgan Stanley, they project a strong global GDP growth of 6.4% for 2021, which will be led by emerging markets, followed by reopening economies in the US and Europe. But the question is this, they say, yes, we've seen what other analysts are projecting. But for us, we see a prospect that is brighter at least than what World Bank, IMF, and the rest of them are projecting. So what do we see? Now, for us in BA Consult, we see a GDP growth that will be much better. Of course, slower than what MBS projected, but better than what IMF and the World Bank project. And why do we say that? Now, there's a pattern with Nigeria's economy over the decades that oftentimes the way our economy responds to not only stimulus on the one hand, but to developments, even in the international market, completely runs contrary to the normal economic projections that are made. So, but given that, we also see that, yes, there's some likely to be some good news. If you look at the projection of the demand for crude oil this year, all the projections point positive. So the area that would have been of concern to Nigeria is production and export. As we had the report out yesterday, the Chinese economy grew very well in 2020. So China, of course, second largest economy in the world. And what everybody is now talking about as of today, as of this morning, is what can we learn from China in terms of how they responded to the pandemic and succeeded in growing their economy in 2020. So now, why we think this might likely happen is if our government takes the right course in terms of policy choices, also in terms of policy sequencing. we see an average consumer price inflation of 40.27% for the year. Now, this doesn't mean that this is where we end the year, but we're talking about an average, which means inflation rate we expect we also dampen a little. But we don't expect any major change in interest rates for now. Lending rates will remain double digit, and of course, deposit rates will remain very low. Exchange rates. Now, this depends on who central bank listens to, okay? Just like Dr. Salami said, yes, the issue is not about devaluation of the Naira and all these other things that we say. Everywhere around the world, central banks have gone pragmatic. And the question for me is, the central issue in the exchange value of Nigeria's currency is not about the superficial management of the exchange value of the currency that IMF will always recommend. Rather, it's about the nexus between imports and exports. Until there is a change in the nexus, we may not get any reduction in the pressure that is causing Naira to lose value. So I will end this way, and that is on the same note that I heard Dr. Salami conclude, and that is I see 2021 as more promising. But what should businesses be doing? You have to think global and act local, just like Doyin said. The reality is that competition is no longer within the borders here. Okay, you are competing globally. And of course, in your own organization, you need to make strategy everybody's everyday job, which means every staff of your organization must understand the basics of the strategy of the company, who we are, what we are doing, and what we want to achieve. Then, of course, this is an era of knocking on so many doors in the sense that consumer behavior has changed. So to get them to prefer to buy from you will take more than what it cost before COVID-19. Then measuring performance has become very, very important. And this is also a time to reward only contribution and not just reward people because they're on your payroll. You reward them for contributing to the objectives and goals of the organization. Finally, just like we are doing here on this platform this morning, you must scan the environment continually and give attention to what others don't see. If the books you read as a leader are the books other people are reading, you are not any better than them. If you look at the same data and all you see is what other people see, you are not any better than them. So the target of every business leader should be to see what others don't see. Then in reading books, as we recommend to leaders, you must read the books other people don't read. And that is how you get ideas. So let me say a very big thank you for opportunity to speak here. And I know a lot of justice to be done to the subjects by the experts we have on the panel. And especially, let me say a big thank you to Yomi for accepting to be our moderator. I was excited when they told me that you accepted. And also, Sheye, please, we take permission to leave now because I have to catch a flight that was changed from the time it was supposed to be. So thank you so very much. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adedoyin. We know that you are on your way to Calabar right now to catch a flight, and you have actually joined Dr. Adedoyin to set the tone. We, at this point, will continue with the panelists, and here I'm going to hand over to Yomi, who is going to be the moderator of this session. So, Yomi, you are most welcome. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so very much, Sheye. A very welcome to all our participants to this very important segment. It's a discussion segment. The beautiful thing, or maybe the challenge now that's been thrown at us, is that our two eminent paper presenters, so Dr. Salami and Dr. Adedoyin, they've given up their presentations and they have taken a leave. So we are left to, so whatever we say in their absence, maybe the registrar will help us collate and send across to them. But I'm very much delighted to be moderating this segment. My name is Yomi Olugbero, as it's been announced. And so before I go on to just introduce the very eminent and distinguished panel member that I have, just a reminder of some bit of protocol. So we will want all the participants to remain muted. Let your microphone remain muted. If you do have questions, please use the chat box. So you can use the Q&A feature, so you can put in your question, and we will try as much as possible to run through like about 2 rounds of question and answer from my end to each of the panel member. And we want to create maybe about 20-25 minutes to be able to attend to live questions. So please use the opportunity of the Q&A to feed in your questions. If you will rather prefer to be heard, you want to speak up and ask your question live, you can use the raise your hand feature. So we will take that after I've done about 2 rounds of questions with the panel member. So please keep those questions coming, and we will attend to them. So let me now, introduce the very distinguished panel of 6, that I have this morning. I will start with His Excellency Ambassador Ayoola Olukanni, who is the Director General of NACCIMA. NACCIMA is the Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines, and Agriculture. So welcome, Your Excellency. As many of us know, between 2003, 2007.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you. Ambassador served as the acting commissioner to Kenya, and from 2011 to 2015 was High Commissioner to Australia. So we are happy to have you on the panel. The second panel member that I will introduce is the Managing Director and the Regional Executive of Ecobank. That's Mr. Patrick Akinwuntan. Mr. Akinwuntan, it's a pleasure to have you on this panel. I'm honored to be hosting you.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much. So I also have on the panel Mr. Ayodeji Balogun. I hope I can see its picture now or its video. I hope Mr. Balogun is online. He's the CEO of AFEX Commodity Exchange.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm representing the CEO. Akintunde Akinyinka is my name. I'm the VP of Financial Markets.
Absolutely. Akinka, good to have you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Right. I have Mr. Akeem Lawal. Mr. Akeem Lawal is the Divisional Chief Executive of Payment Processing Interswitch.
Yes, good morning, and thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. I also have Mr. Olasehinde Samuel Johnson, who is the MD CEO of Infinity Paints International. Welcome. Good to have you. All right. And of course, we have Ms. Afolakemi Bolanle, who is the Chief Operation Lead of MedicinesHub Pharmaceutical and Health Consulting. Very delighted to have you grace this panel. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm excited to be here this morning. Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
All right. So we'll delve into the conversation now. So we've all listened to the insight from Dr. Salami and Dr. Adedoyin. I think if I summarize what Dr. Salami said in that, I think about 20-25 minutes of presentation, it gave us an overview of where the economy is, what will be the likely drivers of growth, and what will be the drivers of what we're going to see in 2021, and what should businesses do. That's essentially how he chronicled his presentation. And of course, he left us with a word of hope, saying that 2021 will be better than 2020. That's what we're hoping for. And Dr. Adedoyin's presentation also sank quite substantially, gave us an overview of the economy and the outlook for 2021. I like some of the call out from the publications, by, I think he cited one from The Economist and another one from a consulting house, some of the forces that, that are shaping the world as of today, on the back of pandemic, globalization, how that's been truncated, the digital revolution. He spoke to digital revolution. It talks about the geographical rivalry between world powers, around the world. the scourge of inequality, climate change, and a number of issues that it speaks to that businesses needs to be doing to prepare themselves. So what I would want us to do as we go around each of the panel member is to share insight from your own vintage positions, where you are, the businesses you lead and the sector that you are in, and to be able to give us some bit of perspective as to maybe first of all, what you saw of 2020 and how you think the outlook will be for 2021. If you permit me, I will start with Ambassador, with DG of NACCIMA. So with your own vintage position as the DG of NACCIMA, so what's your assessment, sir, of the performance of the economy in 2020? How the resilience of the economy was obviously put to test. So how resilient is this economy, and what is the your assessment of the various policy intervention and measures that the government introduced in 2020, from a fiscal to monetary and all of the intervention? Just some bit of an overview from you of how you think we fared in 2020.
Well, thank you very much. I sincerely hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Yes, yeah. Well, of course, because of time factor, I'll just quickly run through it. It was a very tough year. It was a very tough year. The lockdown, the NSAS process, all of these we know. This is a story which you're all very familiar with. And the response from our members was that it was indeed a very tough year. But when we were moving towards the end of the year, I think there was some hints in terms of the possibility of some assistance, of some kind of recovery, which is going on now. But the point which we like to make, and this is a reflection from our members, government took some steps in terms of the COVID funds, survival fund, the 50 billion from, I think that was one of the main areas to be able to help our people. Unfortunately, the conclusion was that, one, the COVID fund, which was being handled by the CIBN, was too little and it came too late. I think that is how to summarize it. And I'll give you a good example, because it's always very good to concretize the abstraction. We had some members who applied. Somebody applied for as much as 25 million in context of the MC. They got only 900,000 naira. I mean, that tells you what exactly the crisis, the points which were what I'm talking about, because the issue is always the implementation. So that was the lessons as far as the COVID fund administered by the CIBN through the NISA. That's that point. We need to take that point. But let me now quickly use the opportunity to now also make an intervention. And I'm doing this against the background of the practical experience and what we see and what we get from our members. First, let me say that Dr. Salami, as well as Adedoyin, has of course told us that three things. That certainly 2021 will be a better year. The challenges will continue, but significant opportunities are also there. And I want to give practical example, because that is the perspective which we have. I don't want to go on to the figures and everything like that. One, it is important that we should take a look at the economic sustainability plan and see how people can run with it. It is very, very important that we look at it and also look at it in context of the budget. Because for us in the chambers, the economic sustainability plan, which has very many components, one in terms of the SME survival fund, 75 billion, saving the jobs, and all major sectors of the economy, is for us very key and very important. I don't want to talk about figures. I don't want to talk about all those things are there. So the economic sustainability plan is good, is useful as far as a roadmap in context of practical implementation, because at the end of the day, it is what people are doing on the ground that is key and very important. Increasing production. Let me give two examples and then I will stop. Now, Dr. Adedoyin spoke about reading books what others are not reading and seeing opportunities where others don't see it. I'm very fond of this. There is a company, one of our members, who is also doing a lot of things in the area of steel production. You know what? They also have a small little coffee producing company, small little segment. They produce coffee. And when I went there, I said, "You are here?" They said, "Yes, we are here. We're producing coffee. You know, and we are not even able to meet the demands of the Nigerian coffee. This is run here in somewhere in Ibeju, and they use logistics companies, they go online to sell there. So they're doing that. So they said that they want to increase production in terms of production of coffee to satisfy the taste of the young millennium. Who now, Starbucks, they go with their laptop to drink coffee and things like that. But they said they want to now increase them. So I said, what are you doing to do this? They said they've gone to acquire 2 acres of land somewhere around Ogun State, and they want to increase production of their coffee. And they said they are doing it with an eye for competitiveness to be able to compete with Kenya as well as Ethiopian coffee. They are there. So this is some of the things we're talking about in terms of what they want to do. It's a very good example. Now, let me also give you another practical example.
If
some
you
of our
can wrap
members,
that up in like a minute, Your Excellency.
Yes, in a minute.
Yeah.
Yes, I want to wrap it up in a minute. We have some of our members, the Nsukka Chambers of Commerce is helping about 300 farmers to produce the Nsukka yellow pepper. The Nsukka yellow pepper is supposed to be a niche product, and 300 farmers in terms of it. So they're now looking at how to access funds to be able to go into production as far as them, and they're looking at it to be able to export, So these are some of the practical things which we're talking about, that we should capacitate our members as far as those issues are concerned. And of course, I sincerely hope that when we get, and finally, of course, the mining sector is also one of the areas in terms of looking at it. There are mining states across Nigeria, and I want to use this opportunity to please appeal to the CIBN. Please encourage your members, the banks, to develop mining portfolios. I serve as ambassador in Australia, and I know what mining did as far as Australian economy itself is concerned. It's an area which we should look at, and there is 2016 roadmap for the growth and development of the Nigerian mining sector. And I think it's one of the new books we should read, one of the new areas, new opportunities we should look at. Those are my preliminary comments for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Very insightful, and those experiences from the field, I think it's one that participants will find particularly delighting. I think I should move to Mr. Akinwuntan, and I'm particularly interested in your own insights. You lead a Pan-African financial institution, so we know what happened from both an economic standpoint, because the medical emergencies and all of the crises that the pandemic created, was just half of the, or just part of the question. It was both a health crisis as much as it was an economic crisis. So from your own vintage position, looking at across sectors, from a financier and a financial institution and helping businesses, so what did you see? What were the trends that you thought emerged out of those crises in 2020, and in a way, where does that leave us from 2021 from an economic standpoint?
Well, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here to join in this discussion. I think previous speakers have sort of painted the global position of 2020. We all know that what started as a health crisis or a health challenge quickly moved to become a major economic challenge. And we saw the interplay between economic activity and health. And that lesson we can see is being deployed as we cope with the second wave and as we enter 2021, where attention is being given to the health issues, but a lot of care is being taken to avoid locking down the economy and dislocating the global supply chains that keeps the global economy running. One major learning is that it became very clear to everyone how interdependent global economy is. And within Africa, as you know, Ecobank is present in 33 countries in Africa. We saw clearly the interplay of the dependence of African economies interdependence of African economies, wherein the need for countries in Africa to begin to trade and transact much more closely with one another, because immediately the global pandemic struck, the transatlantic trade routes were shut down, basically. Whereas we saw that production within Africa was being trapped because the ability to export to those economies in Europe and the Americas had dislocation. And we also saw dislocation in the access to the import market. And so global dislocation refocused us to understanding that we need to focus on Africa as a common market. And that we will talk about, I'm sure, shortly when we look at the opportunities in 2021 with the Africa Free Trade Continental Agreement. Now, within Nigeria, where we operate, we saw clearly that the central bank actually came up with key policies and accommodative stance meant to ensure that businesses are supported through the challenge of the lockdowns and the economic disruptions of 2020. In fact, if you recall, you check your statistics, in the month of June alone, incremental credit to the economy from banks in Nigeria was about 3.3 trillion naira. I know that my colleague, the ambassador, spoke about the throughput, the expectation of the policy directives in terms of support for SMEs, support for the healthcare industry, support for the manufacturing industry, the agricultural industry, and all that. But I'd like to use some statistics. One, if you look at cost of funds or cost of credit to businesses, clearly 2020 saw a shift towards a single-digit interest rate economy. Even the central bank intervention funds moved from 9% to 5%. Ecobank is a major participant in those funding, particularly for the agri industry and for the manufacturing industry. And we actually charge 5% as required under those programs. That's the first time in my career, I'm about 32 years in banking, it's the first time I'm seeing a consistent focus on creation of a single-digit interest rate economy, which enables the economy to begin to move from a consumptive economy to a productive economy. The whole idea is that Nigeria, with 200 million inhabitants, with an economy of over 450 billion US dollars, we need to become a mainly productive and export-based economy in order to create employment, power entrepreneurs, take our rightful place as a global player. The opportunities are there. 2020 was a major wake-up call. Access to finance became cheaper. Cost of doing financial transactions, as we know, electronic banking transactions in Nigeria recorded a 42% growth in 2020 compared to 2019, cresting at about 160 trillion naira worth of electronic banking payments. We saw that acceleration because the Nigerian financial institutions, Nigerian banks, fintechs, major players, including Ecobank, we all invested in electronic banking platforms, which became quite appropriate to bring banking services into everybody's palm, into everybody's living room or bedroom or office or wherever. Even in your car, you're able to make payments, you're able to have collections. That reduced the cost of doing financial transactions in Nigeria. The cost of ATM withdrawals was reduced, POS collection cost was reduced. So we saw a rebasing of the cost of financial activities in the economy in 2020 meant to begin to support the drive towards a productive economy, both in the agri sector, in the creative services sector, in the SME sector, and as AFCA will come into play this year, we look forward to creation of African multinationals out of Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much, Akinwuntan. I think that's quite deep and detailed there. So I'm going to move very swiftly to the rest of my panel member, and I will kind of slightly moderate the question. Maybe just a few thoughts around how you think the economy is, but I'm going to add some bit of a direction to the round of questions that I will ask you, just that we can manage time a lot better. I think Mr. Olasehinde Johnson will be, I will want to come to you next. Because during the presentations we've had, and we're all witnesses to this, we've seen the worsening scourge of inequality, unemployment, and how to get the Nigerian productive sector back on the stream. And there have been a lot of talks around the government focusing on manufacturing, construction, agriculture, those sectors that have us a large base that can give us the kind of employment and that can catalyze the economic development. So my question for you will be, what are your suggestions around all of these? So, and how did we do in 2020? What prospect do you see in 2021 on how Nigeria can, focus on this critical sector to be able to tackle unemployment and cater for the most vulnerable members of the society? Your mic appear muted. I can't hear you. Mr. Johnson? Can any other panel member hear Mr. Johnson? I can't seem to hear him.
Yes, I can hear Mr. Johnson.
All right.
I can hear you clearly.
All right.
Please come again with your question.
Right. So the question was, focused around all that we're doing or what we witnessed in 2020 in terms of the the growing inequality base and the unemployment, and vis-a-vis the plan of government to focus on critical sectors like construction, like manufacturing, like agriculture as a way to generate employment. So what's your assessment of the current landscape and what you see going into 2021?
Yes, thank you. So much has been said, and I wouldn't want to go back to highlighting the obvious. But the point has been made, particularly by Dr. Adedoyin Salami, that the world now is a global village. And I want to say that coming down to Nigeria, and of course, manufacturing, it's just the sector that owes the ace to solve our inflationary challenge and also create employment. And so therefore, I want to feel that if the government is going to take production very seriously, a special attention should be given to manufacturing. And the policy reforms of government should be directed to enhancing positive growth in this sector. Well, I want to say also that AFTA is a good news to the sector because we now have a platform to play on a regional note so we can trade across Africa. And of course, that 90% of the goods will not pay tariff for over about 90% of our goods exporting to African countries. is a big boost to production in Nigeria. But then I must also say that if we must make the most of this opportunity, then the government must put measures in place to build capacity. We must build capacity such that we can make the most of this opportunity and enhance production locally. As it is 2020, manufacturing had contracted, and we saw the trends. In Q1, it contracted by 0.43%. In Q2, minus 8.78%. And in Q3, minus 1.51%. And if we must move on from there, well, we see that beyond the capacity of the players in the manufacturing sector, the government had to go the extra mile to address some of those challenges that have been mentioned earlier on. For instance, the unstable forest rates left the manufacturers in the situation whereby they could not bring in the inputs. And of course, we know that Nigeria is not just import dependent in the context of finished goods, but the bulk of our manufacturing outfit rely on imported raw materials heavily. And so we see that last quarter of 2020 till now, manufacturers are facing acute challenges with bringing in their raw materials. And so with all of this, we may not be able to make the most of the ACTA opportunity unless we fix some of those things. Now, much depends on the government to ensure that an enabling environment is created such that we can increase production and grow manufacturing in Nigeria. Right. We cannot but emphasize the impact of insecurity. And that's why I will continually hammer on employment. If we look at what happened in NSAS, you will agree with me that most of those young people that were out on the streets for almost about a week or more are not people in the working class. And so unemployment can constitute big threat to our security. I could grant the manufacturing sector and of course, the whole economy to a halt. So we all also want to appeal to government to take the bull by the horn and fix these challenges. Moreover, if
you can help us wrap up like half a minute so we can go on.
The prospect of improved power, the cement incoming of Siemens is also a good news. We expect that before the end of the year 2021, the impact of their investment will be brought to bear on our manufacturing sector. And that will affect our macroeconomy in the final analysis. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you for those very great insights. I'm going to come to Mr. Lawal. Akeem Lawal, let me come to you next. And I just want your intervention to revolve around the digital revolution, right? That, we witnessed, an acceleration of it for that matter, in 2020, and how we can use that as the catalyst to, resolving, some of this nagging issues. So the unemployment issue, the the diversification of the economy, and many of these policy initiatives and policy measures, most of them can ride on the back of the country leveraging the potential and the possibility that exists in this space. So give us like a quick snapshot of where we are, but more importantly, what direction we should be facing in this area to maximize the potential that is created by this.
All right, thank you. So I think the numbers that Patrick shared earlier on in terms of the growth in digital payments across the country at 44% kind of reflects the fact that the flow of transactions, which reflects the flow of economic activity, seems to have grown despite the challenges of 2020, but that growth was not across board, right? There were a number of sectors that were very badly affected. Travel and entertainment remains depressed even till now. Sports and associated industries saw significant drops in economic activity at the first half of the year, and those are just beginning to recover now. I think the lockdown and the NSAS protest did have a significant impact on the capacity and ability of MSMEs to do business. But what we've seen is that those sectors also seems to have recovered post the lockdown and post the NSAS challenges, right? We also saw, and I know Patrick talked about the increase in lending to the economy, as well as the single-digit interest rates, which is correct, but we did see a collapse in microcredit to the small and medium enterprises and individuals, again, during the first half of the year, and that is only just beginning to recover now. All of these economic activities translated obviously into impacts on employment and employment rates, right? So we did see many MSMEs having to either reduce their workforce or go out of business completely during the first half of the year. And that had significant impact. But the flip to that is that we're seeing dramatic increases in employment in other areas as well, right? We know, for example, that there's been an acceleration in online and social commerce, which is creating entrepreneurs the ability to take their products online and deliver those products directly to customers' homes. And that is driving a new kind of economy where we're seeing small, medium enterprises growing their business and then creating an ecosystem of support organizations, handling logistics, packaging, marketing, that are also growing in that area as well. The other area where we're seeing significant rise in employment is in the area of the agent network and the agency banking. I think in 2020, we saw a dramatic acceleration in the usage of agent network for financial transactions and the circulation of electronic money, to the extent that we now have, I think, almost in excess of 1 million individuals participating in that agent network and creating economic activities that helps them to sustain themselves as well as the economies around them. So we are seeing all of that driving the employment and the gainful employment of people. One other area where we have seen significant improvement is in the technology capacity of our young people, especially in the areas of engineering.
Look like we lost him momentarily there.
To use the talent of young Nigerians.
Okay. Looks like we lost him momentarily there.
I'm back. Can you hear me now?
All right, I can hear you now. So if you can just wrap up in about a minute.
All right, thank you. So we are seeing organizations who are taking advantage of the technology experience and the skills that young Nigerians have built to attract foreign currency income into the Nigerian economy. Of course, that is now also being threatened by the brain drain that we're seeing as more and more young Nigerians are exiting the country and emigrating to other climes based on their anticipation of the economic situation that faces them. I think the final comment I would like to make on this really is the opportunity to grow with the Africa Continental Free Trade. We do see that is a huge opportunity for expanding the capacity of the Nigerian economy to produce. I personally feel it's a travesty that only 7% of trade that happens between African countries and other countries, only 7% of that trade happens within the continent. And I think expanding that with the advent of Africa Continental Free Trade will significantly boost not only Nigeria's economy, but the African economy as well. And there are some new technologies that will make this possible, right? In the technology space, we know, for example, the ability to use technology to solve the problem of currency convertibility. I think during the course of this year, there will be a number of initiatives to try and solve the problem that we have in trade by being able to convert African currencies. And I think that will have a significant impact as we go into 2021. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Right. So I think I like the point where you drop it in terms of the currency convertibility and the ease of trade that it brings with it within the continent. I'll go to Akinyinka, and I'm going to ask you to help deal with one of the elephants in the room, which is around the value of the Naira and the exchange rate system. We've seen a number of measures being driven by the government towards moving inch close to what you say, market-driven exchange rate policy. But the truth is that we're not at that particular point yet, judging by the comment from our two speakers. So Dr. Adedoyin Salami say for him, it's about what policy drive economic growth. And Dr. Adedepe was talking about trying to strike the balance, finding the nexus, between our exports, and import. So what's your view on, what the country is currently doing and the impact it's having, on foreign direct investment? What would be your own, recommendation for what should be an ideal system for Nigeria from an exchange rate policy perspective?
Thank you for that, Mr. Yomi, and it's great to be here. I'll take my clue, as you said, from what the two speakers actually said earlier, and I'll try to link it to an important sector that I think has not been receiving as much attention as it should, even though its economic relevance to the growth of the country is very, very pertinent, which is the agricultural sector. Now, when Professor Adedoyin was speaking, he made mention that for him, it's not so much about devaluation or not, right? As is clear in a lot of countries with the rates of local currency to the dollar is way higher than Nigeria, but you see a lot more productivity in the economy per se, right? And then linking that with having the right blend of import and export, especially across all value assets of generated in Nigeria. If you look at the agricultural sector, for example, which is one that I'm very, very quite familiar with, you'll discover that Nigeria's exports in the international community is something that is of high demand. However, due to a number of factors, two of which are, first of all, low productivity, and secondly, absence of relevant infrastructure, is not gaining the relevant traction it needs in the international community. Now, looking at some other data that we are quite familiar with here, right? Agriculture is one of the highest contributing industry to our GDP, right? On one hand. On the other hand, agriculture also acts as one of the highest employer of labor. And also, if you now look at the financing part of it, less than 10% of commercial assets from banks is dedicated towards agriculture. Now, this is not saying the banks are not doing their relevant part in promoting agriculture, but because of the nature of the industry and the missing infrastructure required to drive value there, you'll discover that the access we're getting from there is very little, right? For the past 5 years, cocoa sesame has been top grossing exports for Nigeria, which if we were to intensify activities there, you could see the value of imports from those sectors increase as much as 40 to 60% over the next couple of years, right? But if you look at it on the flip side, productivity in that sector, especially in Nigeria, is way below comparative countries' averages, meaning we need to put more focus in those sectors or in those value chains. And how do we do that? There needs to be access to finance, right? Agriculture is one of the key parts the CBN looked at whilst putting their intervention for the COVID-19 in place. And it was very clear this sector needs a lot of attention and financial support from the government. From the ESG, it's clear agriculture is top-notch there. Now, the question is, what are the things missing or what are the things required to drive agriculture to where we need it to be? This is by no gainsaying that agriculture is a silver bullet for solving the exchange rate crisis. But if you put more focus around structure in that sector, you could see a monumental increase in value of foreign exchange that you could unlock by playing in that sector. Now, taking another statistics, right? If you look at Nigeria, our fiscal infrastructure for agriculture, storage facilities, for example, only captures less than 1% of the total production of agricultural commodities in the country. If you look at South Africa, for example, they have a stock of about 85%, and in the US, up to 95%, right? Which shows that for us to be able to expand the value we could unlock in this sector, that could give us more relevance in terms of foreign exchange earnings, then we need to do more in terms of infrastructure. Now, AFTCA is now upon us. The question is, what do we need to do as a country to expand our scope to be able to service the region? Yes, Nigeria is playing a very, very important role, but if we don't get our policies right, we may not be able to play and unlock the value we could. And one of the other key missing instruments that I see in this sector is the transmission mechanism of government policies as regards agriculture into actually impacting the sector. So we did a survey last year that looked at crop production in Nigeria for 2020 and the impact on the possible outlook for 2021. And one of the things that became clear due to COVID and other factors was production was greatly reduced locally, right? And this was due to the impact of COVID-19. And why agriculture is very special is because it's a very, very time-sensitive and time-bound activity, right? At the onset of the lockdown was when agricultural activities was almost beginning, which is where most smallholder farmers will go to farm to produce, right? Now, at that point, due to the lockdown, inputs couldn't move across the country, right? We had shortage of relevant inputs for farmers to have access to, which is to say, even if you have the finance, you may not even get the products to go to farm with. Now, being able to structurally address this will require all key stakeholders, financial institutions, government agencies, various regulatory bodies to come together and ensure that the infrastructure required for adequate and appropriate distribution of all these facilities across the country are in place. And they can't do it in isolation, right? There's a heavy overlap required with the private sector to drive this, which is the role, one of the roles we play at AFEX Commodities Exchange. So in summary from my own side on this part is to increase the value we unlock on the FX part in Nigeria and to balance the import and export nexus that was mentioned earlier, the transmission mechanism of government policies to affect relevant agricultural produce that have relevant exports FX earning potential for Nigeria needs to be more streamlined. And one of the ways the government could do this is by embracing transparency of prices, right? Once you have transparent prices around, either on the FX side or the inputs and production or any activity that affects these value chains, then you see more player embracing this, and you see more participation by relevant financial institutions in promoting activities in this sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Great insight. Let me just quickly jump to Afolakemi to wrap up this round, and then I will go back another round. If there was a sector that was definitely kept on its toe, it was the health sector. So it was in for all intent and purpose a health crisis first that snowballed into all of that. So it definitely caught us napping as it did the entire world. But what I also saw with the health sector is that it wasn't just the challenges alone that it created. It also created an opportunity, for invention, for vaccine, different kind of pharma companies, churning out, different protective equipment and all of that. So I just want you to help us x-ray what the experience of Nigeria was, from a health perspective, and what were the key lessons, so our response, how did the financing, the capacity, the readiness, the infrastructure, how did it affect us? There are news, even as recently as early this morning, of government releasing some funds for locally developed vaccine, so how ready are we? And if you can just help us do a little bit of a peep into 2021 of what to expect. When will the vaccine come, and how will the health sector respond in 2021?
Thank you so much again for having me, and I'm excited to be here. As all the speakers have said, 2020 was quite challenging in terms of the coronavirus pandemic. But however, for Nigeria, the problems were the fact that the health systems had been previously underfunded. For instance, in terms of health budgets to the total federal government budget for 2020 that was revised, the contribution or the allocation to the health budgets was 3.83%. And this is far less than the 15% that has been advocated for over the years to support improvement in terms of the health outcomes of Nigerians, and also to support health facilities and all of that. So in terms of leadership and governance for the health system strengthening position, we have, in the past, we have underfunded health budgets. Even when you compare it to education, power, agriculture, and transport, health was consistently underfunded. But however, because of COVID, there were interventions from the monetary policy end. There was 100 billion credits, which is targeted at indigenous pharmaceutical manufacturing to trigger both research and development, and also in the manufacture of active pharmaceutical ingredients. This is a good one. Because the pharmaceutical market is actually a market estimated to be between 600 million to about $1.2 billion, but according to the Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Group of the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria. But however, predominantly the manufacturing sector for Nigeria is more focused on drug products, which means we are heavily reliant on importations of our active pharmaceutical ingredients, and also pharmaceutical excipients that can actually be manufactured locally due to the availability of cassava and other food crops that can be turned into pharmaceutical binders, particularly pharmaceutical grade starch, and also the pharmaceutical binders that we could create locally in Nigeria. So these funds, and we also have a lot of herbal medicines that these funds would allow for intensive research to find active phytochemicals that can be converted and developed into drugs useful for even neglected diseases that are prevalent within Nigeria. Another issue that 2020 coronavirus pandemic exacerbated is actually the service delivery. In terms of service delivery, our service delivery within the health system has actually been poor over the years due to funding issues. And Nigeria has a case of high unemployment. We have high poverty index. And so this situation, has made service delivery to be very, very poor. For instance, in terms of what are the factors that can facilitate an improvement in service delivery, it will be even the health workers within the health systems. For instance, Nigeria has 457 doctors per every 100,000 population. That is low. That cannot ensure that we have the right health service delivery required. 30 nurses per 100,000 population, and COVID made it worse. Apart from exit of technical skills to developed countries where their services are probably more rewarded, we also have a lot of loss of lives from the front end healthcare workers due to coronavirus. And this has also made the number of healthcare workers that we have very, very low. And I think we need to think about it in terms of how to improve, either work with countries where our technical skills have gone to, in terms of financial investments to help with our healthcare workers. So that's actually one of the challenges. Then also in terms of medical products and vaccines, which is where the pharmaceutical industry lies, we have a lot of issues around, low capacity utilization because of low demand. So when you have, because the pharmaceutical market or the health system is actually funded by out-of-pocket payments, predominantly out-of-pocket payments. And so if you have a workforce, if you have high unemployment, that becomes difficult to fund. If you have high unemployment, that becomes difficult to fund essentially. So in essence, 2020 was a tough year for the health industry. But however, for vaccines, I know that Nigeria, in the 2021 budget, Nigeria has highlighted that they will be bringing 40 million doses of the coronavirus vaccines. I want to believe that those 40 million will be like the initial procurement for the country, because in terms of the number of vaccines that be required in Nigeria, you have to look at it in proportion to our population. We are over 200 million people. So that means the 40 million doses will cannot ensure that we have herd immunity. It's not sufficient. So those plans are not sufficient, but we hope that between the first quarter, we're expecting a proportion of that 40 million doses for the Nigerian population. Then another issue that the pharmaceutical sector faces is issue of counterfeit of drugs, which is still eminent due to the fact that we don't have harmonized drug distribution centers. We don't have, and these are things that we're hoping that the government will sign and begin to implement the national drug distribution guideline that was actually agreed by the Federal Ministry of Health and the stakeholders, including Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Group of the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria. We're hoping that there will be implementation of the national drug distribution guideline to also help manage the challenges around counterfeit and substandard drugs, and also improve the health outcomes. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Afolakemi. I'm going to do this round is going to be quite swift and direct, but I want you to go across all my panel members. And the focus for us is to actually look at 2021 from both an opportunity and what strategy can business implement. How can business be positioned? There is an economic sustainability plan. Yes. Budget 2021. It's signed. Even with over 5 trillion of its deficit there, but we know where the outlays and all the expenses are going into. So I just want some across each of us for us to be able to give participants some bit of insight into where to unlock value and opportunity. So maybe I start with Mr. Akinwuntan to just quickly look at it, particularly maybe if you can focus on the budget and the planned spending. Are there specific areas that businesses and Nigerians in general should be excited about? So and how can business position to take advantage of the direction government is facing for 2021?
Thank you very much. Once again, just very quickly, one of the things we need to learn as a country is sustained focus. If you look at our experience, I did mention Ecobank, we operate in various countries across Africa. What you see from one year to the other is a consistent focus on certain fundamentals. So if you pick Côte d'Ivoire, they consistently focused on a cocoa-led agroeconomy. You pick a Cotonou next door here, they continuously focused on a cotton and cashew nut-led agroeconomy. These are all economies that do not have crude oil. They import petroleum products, but they operate in a single-digit inflation, single-digit interest and a rate environment, and are able to have predictability in their economy. This is what 2020 brought home, and I'll just ask us to recheck. 2015, 2016, the recession at that time forced us to begin to look inwards. And we saw Nigeria focus a lot on first minimizing need for import of agricultural products and a very consumptive way of life. In fact, it became a bit of an anomaly to see imported exotic drinks on every table around. And we were beginning to be less dependent on crude oil. In 2020, that cycle has come through a different pressure. And now into 2021, I would like Nigerians, all of us, to focus on the opportunity to participate in the productive economy. First, there is a lot of focus on the agricultural sector. Virtually every bank today has a very vibrant agric desk or agric department. Ecobank held a first national agric summit last year, and we would repeat that this year, bringing the ecosystem participants in the agricultural industry, be it in the cultivation, in the storage, in the processing. And the whole idea, if you look at the opportunity in Nigeria, is two ways in agric. One, reducing need to import certain agricultural products. So rice, we know we are getting to be self-sufficient as a country in rice. There are offshoots of cassava, things like ethanol, which is imported to handle the various drinks, beverages that is known in the economy. We need to look at all the areas that we import in the agricultural sector and focus on investing and taking the opportunity to replace that by participating in producing and manufacturing such products. And the central bank and all the banks are very supportive in this area. Second, textile. It has been around us for a long time that the quantum or the opportunity to produce our own textile products. And I refer to an initiative, for instance, that Ogun State has been pioneering, putting the Adire on a world stage and making it a question of national consciousness to provide employment, to produce fabrics. In the fashion and creative industry, Nigeria is a potential world leader, be it in terms of the movie industry, be it in terms of streaming, be it in terms of production. In Africa, we are the center and we should maximize the creative industry. The fintech industry, Nigerians and the intellect that we have, the young people, the opportunity to leverage technology. We have a strong telecoms base in Nigeria. We should leverage that to begin to maximize the opportunity. Last year, my colleague Akeem belongs to a company that moved into the unicorn grade. I know we call it zebra corn grade in Africa now to make it Africa focused. We have the opportunity. For us, for instance, at Ecobank, we've made ourselves now a platform. We want fintechs that want to dominate Africa to leverage our platform across Africa as a springboard. There are significant opportunities. As a platform, we hope that we're able to empower as many Nigerians that are in the technology, in the fintech space, to begin to earn significant foreign exchange. The diaspora is very critical. The central bank has given a much more conducive environment where the over $20 billion earned by Nigerians in diaspora can be channeled back into Nigeria. You receive your monies in foreign currency, and therefore you insulate yourself from any of the exchange rate vagaries. We shore up our external reserves. We also play a strong role. That's a major opportunity because today, the value of our earnings in foreign exchange from intellectual capacity, some people say brain drain, but if you look at Israel, they do not really look at their citizens operating across the world as brain drain. We need to change that mentality and see it as intellectual economic power. If we already have as many Nigerians out there, we should establish ourselves as a leading force in creating value internationally and allow it flow into our economy to support the infrastructure, the agri-industry, the health industry, the education industry in Nigeria. And that way, we move more into being a sustainable, productive economy. The banks are ready. We are ready. We should look at the opportunity in spite of the challenges created and realize our potential, create employment, bring banking to everyone. As was said, there are over 1 million agency locations now in Nigeria. Every Nigerian can participate. Financial inclusion is actually improving. We now talk more of wealth creation. So there are unique opportunities, there are challenges, but it's important that we focus on the opportunities and realize our potential from 2021 going forward and become a powerhouse of economy in Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. I know that time will definitely be a challenge for us to be able to extract all that panel member we want to dish out to us. So I will just try to merge that questions around each panel member, giving us insight into where to unlock opportunities in 2021 with a few of the questions there. And I will go to the ambassador next, because one of the questions on the platform was specifically posted at you. Jeff was specifically asking about your personal, definition or perspective of the economic sustainability plan. That can you be specific on how you think we should articulate this and the key variables we should consider? So if you can help us talk to the perspective of the chamber on the economic sustainability plan and just link that to where the opportunity can be unlocked for members and for participants in 2021. Sir.
Well, thank you very much, and I sincerely hope I can be heard. I'll be very, very brief and quick. I requested for a copy of the economic sustainability plan, and I think Mr. Akinwuntan has also mentioned. I think we must remain focused. The economic sustainability plan covers very areas. The real sector speaks about food for all, agri and food security. About 634 billion was attached to it. Jobs through homes, mass housing strategy, 240 billion. Jobs for youth and women, post-COVID, about 90 billion. The National Gas Expansion Program, about close to about this is about 23 billion. Then there is also support for SMEs, close to about 15 billion. And then support for small businesses. So there are specific amount of money which has been attached to this the economic sustainability plan. It is necessary for people. And like Mr. Akinwuntan, let us remain focused. We have it. Are we going to throw it away? And I'm aware that the ministerial committee has been set up in terms of how to access about the 75 billion. So it is important for people to let themselves know, to know what is involved in terms of that. And that's why as NACCIMA, the National Association of Chambers of Commerce, we are sensitizing our members as far as the ESP itself is concerned. Because we can't say because we have a budget 2020-2021, we're going to, are we going to throw it away? No, it's going to be there. So it is possible and people should take advantage of this particular area as far to familiarize themselves with it. That's what NACCIMA is trying to sensitize its members across the country. That is in terms of quantity, because there is amount of money which is allocated to it. So people should know, but if you don't know, you will not be able to. But the committee has been set up, and NACCIMA and a few other members of the private sector, because the key issue is government is looking at how the private sector can help to implement the ESP. Let me quickly run on to what Mr. Akintunde said in terms of our areas of strength. He made mention of the fact as far as the question of the textile sector is concerned. The authentic Ogun. NACCIMA was invited. We went to Ogun State for the launching of this authentic Ogun fabric, the Adire, and like you said, it can be woven into the creativity sector. What exactly is going on as far as that is concerned now? As far as government is concerned, sustainability is key. And of course, also, let us challenge, let the private sector rise up to the challenge and provide the. I serve as a Nigerian diplomat across the world for 35 years, and I know what it is in terms of the question of Nigerian fabrics and other things like that. But before I leave, I must mention the AFCTA. It is key, it is very important. When it started, NACCIMA started the dialogue series. We should remember that the AFCTA is not a 100-meter dash. It's a long distance race, but we have to know what is involved for us to be able to compete. And I made mention of a company that is now producing coffee and acquired grounds, 2 acres, with an eye to increase production. But not only that, to be able to compete within the framework of the FCTA, and they want to compete with the Kenyan coffee, and others. These are practical things. On our part, we have a lot of plans. There are a lot of government programs to support the private sector, but implementation is always the key. It's always the key, and that's why sensitization and education, as far as this is concerned. Look at the National Gas Expansion Project, for example. There is a small area of it. There is the Central Bank Intervention Facility, the CIBN Intervention Facility within the framework of the National Gas Expansion Project. How many of its SMEs have opportunity to be able to look at that? We must look at opportunities that is in that particular area, because Nigeria is more of a gas country. So this year, let us look at how we can look at the gas expansion project and take advantage of it. And NACCIMA will continue to do its own work, because let us remember the private sector is the key as far as these issues are concerned. And that's why, as a Chambers of Commerce, National Chambers of Commerce, we are in all the corners. The other time I had something with Bonny Chambers. Online like this, Bonny Chambers, far away in Bonny, in that little corner. And they're looking at how, as a Chambers of Commerce, they can take advantage of the opportunities within their immediate environment. So let us look at how we can do all this thing practically, because it is not just what we have on paper. Honestly speaking, it is more of the practical implementation. And like I said, we look forward to working closely with all stakeholders, the CIBN, and all of us in terms of making sure that this year, the opportunity which has opened up in terms of the possibility of coming out of recession, and then of course, growing our economy is there. Right. We all received hamper this last season. 2 days ago, I was looking at the hamper. The number of products which are of Nigerian product, which I've got in place, maybe it's just about 3 over 10. But I tell you that the 3 of the Nigerian product can compete effectively. We have in terms of the cashew nuts, we also have dry ginger. We know very many of our members who are in sesame seeds. Let us support SMEs that produce all of this. And the packaging, of course, has improved in terms of what's to be done. So this is why, of course, I think that, and like I said, we are glad the SME within the framework of the sustainability plan has started. And of course, we sincerely hope that the implementation of this. And of course, we must also reduce our import. The import bill. Don't let us say now oil prices are going up. Hallelujah. Let us hope on that. No, this is the time to hold back and ensure that we improve export in terms of, and we have the capacity, and many of our members, of course, and so we'll continue the conversation.
Thank you, Ambassador.
But at the end of the day, after this conversation, the outcome of the conversation must be. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you so very much. And I know there's so much more to be said. Akinyinka, maybe I should just jump straight to you, because this one of the questions posted on the platform. I would, if you can take it together with your own insight into where to unlock opportunity. Adeni Kwekun was specifically asking about the projection for 2021. That yes, it looks positive from both global and national economic projections, but that these projections were done at the point the second wave of the pandemic hasn't peaked. So with the present spike in the second wave of the pandemic in Nigeria and across the world, can we still rely on these projections seriously? So if we think we're going to exit recession at a particular quarter, or growth is going to be 4% globally, and he thinks those projections came in prior to this second wave. So are those projections still realistic? So if you can just combine that with what your view is in terms of where to unlock value in 2021.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So let me start with my view in terms of where to unlock value in the new year. We see and we'll keep seeing a lot of innovation in most of the underserved industries in Nigeria. I'll keep referring to the agricultural sector. Over the last couple of years, we've seen people coming in with innovative solutions to attract financing. And we believe in 2021, there will be a significant uptick in terms of financing that is coming to the sector. There will be a lot of product innovation, both working together with Nigeria, as well as capital market operators to bring a product that meets the minimum requirements for banks to finance and play with. And this is definitely going to see an increase in terms of land production, access to finance, and basically productivity in the agricultural ecosystem is going to increase. The mining sector too is not left out. We see a lot of interest in that area as well. A lot of more people are looking at that sector. And the good thing about being a Nigerian right now is the fact that a lot of underserved industries are being enabled for Nigerians in the local economy to be able to play in it with the support of appropriate financial institutions. So we'll see more people going into those sectors and then unlocking the value that has been dormant there, right? And we'll see a lot of these players building more platform models that will attract people to leverage on ICT to extract value across. You can't discount ICT in this new year, right? More people will take hold of technology. To what extent is left to be seen. Over the world, we've seen Nigerians doing innovative things in terms of technology across the financial sector, across the consumer industry, agricultural ecosystem, leveraging on technology to unlock value. So our view is that more of those will come into play, and it will greatly go towards increasing production, both locally and the export relevance of Nigeria. And speaking to what the ambassador said earlier, most products emanating from Nigeria could favorably compete with any product globally, right? What we need to now put in place are now mechanisms to reduce the cost of business financing for those entities locally, right? And good, like the MD of Ecobank mentioned earlier, cost of financing is trending towards the single digits mark, right? More people accessing it at single digits will mean that their products will be more competitive internationally due to their local production. Hopefully, most of the other government programs will come into alignment, generally tending towards the cost of carrying out business in Nigeria. So 2021 is a year that we should be excited about, and I think we'll see much drive towards stability in the exchange rates and play in the FX markets. As to the question, right? yes, the second wave is peaking in Nigeria right now. But the good thing in one side, which may not be totally favorable for us all, is the availability of vaccine, right? Yes, the second wave is there. In developed countries, vaccines are already being administered. Sooner or later, we'll see some volumes available in Nigeria. I think I saw a projection somewhere saying about 40 or 60 million Nigerians are planned to be vaccinated this year. I'm not sure of the exact value, but there's hope in that regard. The other part is the fact that it is clear to all stakeholders that a second lockdown would not help the economy, right? I don't think it's on the table for consideration by any of the government agencies. What most governments are putting in place are restrictions, right? Limiting places where people could possibly catch this virus. Now, if we see uptick in economic activities, or if we don't see a shutdown of the economy, then it's clear that it's very, very likely that the projected numbers will be a reality this year for a number of factors. First is the fact that we'll be coming from a very, very low base vis-a-vis last year, right? So this year will give you a very, very higher potential to increase production as a country and to remain competitive. If we see stability in we keep coming to these exchange rate policies, right, which shows that it's very, very key to promoting the growth of the local economy. So if we see stability and more transparency there, if we see the play of the central bank in terms of putting in more structure around it, more credibility, transparency in terms of administration of the foreign exchange policy, and then we'll be a step closer towards getting out of the recession or the downside of growth that we're experiencing currently. Another key factor would be the fact that a lot of local agencies are seeing value in producing locally and setting up their infrastructure that will promote the production of their local factories, local consumables, right? This is hopefully a key factor leading to more employment. So more youths are likely going to be seen entering the workforce this year. And with these expansionary activities in place, uptick in all key indicators will be it for me. More production locally, and then more participation by all key stakeholders to take the economy towards the targeted points. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Akeem, let me just come to you for your own sake. Please help us keep those that are not speaking muted, please. So, Akeem, let me come to you for your own perspective, and if I can ask you to help me attempt this question on the borrowing interest rate. So he spoke about what Dachi spoke about the effort of the CBN to bridge the gap to reduce interest rate from 9 to 5%. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic. He said even though this is with minimal impact because of the size of the fund, so he's asking what the banking industry is doing generally, or what the monetary policy direction is towards reducing the big gap between borrowing interest rates and the saving rates. So if you can help, attend that question in addition to your view on where to unlock opportunities in 2021.
Thank you. I actually think that one of my recommendations of where to unlock opportunity actually addresses that concern. So we did, as Interswitch, start looking at lending a few years ago. And I think one of the reasons why that gap exists is because it's the same process, at least then, that banks would use to offer a loan to Dangote at 1 billion that they used to offer loans to someone who wants to borrow 20,000 naira, right? What has happened over the last few years is that several banks are beginning to digitize the process that they use for evaluating credit risk and issuing loans to their consumers. And that has significantly reduced the cost to serve, as well as the accessibility of such loans to people who need it, right? It's the reason why during the course of the last year, you would see that interest rates, especially for nano and micro loans, have dropped dramatically. because banks have been able to digitize that process quite significantly. And the way to continue to bring down that gap really is to continue to digitize more. And the digitization now has to extend into these government intervention programs to make sure that the way that the funds ultimately get to the end beneficiary completely eliminate some of the inefficiencies that are associated with the current processes that causes costs to go up, right? So one of the opportunities that I see, and this cuts across sectors, not just banking, really is in digitizing, right? If you're an organization, irrespective of your sector, and over the last few years, you have not invested in digitization of your operations or your processes or your services, chances are the companies who have digitized have outperformed you by 2 or 3 times in the last year. And this cuts across all sectors. In financial services, clearly the banks who have invested significantly in digitization over the last few years came out of 2020 smelling like roses. They have outperformed the banks who did not make that investment by a factor of 2 or 3 times to 1. Same thing in health. Hospitals and related health industries who have digitized continue to serve customers using digital channels, while those who have not did not. Education is the same thing. Several schools to reopen their operations by offering online schools. Many schools were not able to do that, continue to survive until today, and so on and so forth. So one of the biggest opportunities in 2021 is to invest in digitization. One of the I would like to add to that is, as you invest in digitization, please also invest in cybersecurity and fraud management.
Okay. Akeem, are you back? It seems to have lost you momentarily. Okay. So because of our time.
I'm sorry, I disconnected for a second. Thank you. I am back. So I just wanted to post the digitization point with investments in cybersecurity and fraud prevention techniques as you go along. I think the final point, and I just really need to reiterate this, is we do see opportunities in Africa trade, right? So as an organization, if you haven't began to think about what you can produce for export and how to improve the quality of your production to take advantage of the demand that the African continent creates, I think you should begin to think about that and think about it very seriously now. I do believe that one of the investments that as a nation or as a continent we need to make is the creation of a platform that will enable the exchange of African currencies and digital goods so that we do not have to, as a continent, depend on any foreign currency for our trade. And I think this is a crucial investment as well as an opportunity to invest in as we go into 2021. I think the final comment really for me is around leadership. After what we've gone through as a country and as a world, as a humanity in 2020, 2021 requires boldness in terms of leadership. We need to get rid of the fear and be bold in some of the decisions that we take and the opportunities that we pursue as we go into 2021. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. So, Mr. Johnson, maybe your own quick intervention in terms of where the opportunities are in 2021 and what businesses can be doing from your own perspective. If you can do that within 2 minutes, we will appreciate.
Thank you, Mr. Yomi. Thank you, Mr. Yomi.
Thank you.
There is a consensus of opinion that the business outlook for 2021 is positive. And having said that, the government should make the most of the AFTA agreement That should be an impetus for us to make our country a manufacturing hub. It's doable. We have seen this happen in Aba. What's going on in Aba is a prospect, is a pointer that is doable. We can see the burgeoning revolution that is taking place in Ogun State. The industries are coming up there because an enabling environment was created. Let the government create an enabling environment to engage our massive population and motivate them for production, particularly in the small and medium scale enterprises sector. There's a lot that can be done if we get the right policy framework in place. I also want to harp on the port congestion and lack of access to our ports. We dissipate a lot of production hours to access the port. The problem is still not solved. I should therefore appeal to government to please expedite action to ensure that the port unbundled and the gridlock is addressed. Moreover, I want to say that because of the prospects of the crisis in the forex markets, we should begin to think fast of backward integration as players in the manufacturing sector. And of course, we have hope that in the couples of some few years, private investment in refinery will be yielding profits. And so we expect that some of the players in that sector will be able to move it to the next level by investing into the second phase of our petrochemical sector so that we can have products like titanium dioxide, resins, and some other additives that are heavily imported, produced in Nigeria. Finally, I want to say that the potentials of our country is great.
Thank you.
And if we maximize it, sky is not the limit for us. We'll be a force to reckon with in the global economy. Thank you.
Thank you for that sharing point of wrap up. So Afolakemi, I will give you the last 1 minute to just give you your own perspective as we get into 21, please.
Okay. I think for the health sector, the opportunity is available with technology. COVID, we've seen the use of technology for telemedicine, and also that means doctors can, the patients do not necessarily have to come to the hospitals. Via technology, Zoom, other applications, doctors can speak with their patients, and logistic companies in collaboration with pharmaceutical companies can deliver the medicine. So there are opportunities in the technology space for the health sector. And also artificial intelligence all presents opportunity to improve diagnosis in terms of radio imaging, all of that. Then another opportunity that I see for 2021 is also expected to be triggered by the COVID-19 intervention funds, which is supposed to boost research and development and also manufacture of active pharmaceutical ingredients. Because pharmaceutical market is actually highly dependent imports. 70% of APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients, are imported. And with the foreign exchange risk, it's now important that we look inwards and begin to identify active pharmaceutical ingredients that can be manufactured locally with all the resources available. Then also the 40 million doses of coronavirus that the government has budgeted for 2021. Even 40 million doses with an expected, with the quantification that a patient will require doses is low, albeit that it's low, that 40 million doses translates to about 20 million people in terms of people who will benefit from the 40 million doses. However, it is low, but it's also a step in the right direction. except that our governments are thinking about vaccinating our population. But other non-pharmaceutical inventions for coronavirus still exist and still must be communicated. We need to wash our hands more frequently. We need to ensure that we're social distancing. We also need to ensure that we're boosting our immune system. An opportunity that I see for the health industry and pharmaceutical industry in 2021 lies within trade incentives introduced within ECOWAS. 60% of pharmaceutical production in ECOWAS is domiciled in Nigeria. And despite that, we have a huge underutilization of capacity. So with the COVID intervention fund, I hope that we will improve production of pharmaceutical ingredients, and this can be moved within the ECOWAS corridor.
Right.
And I hope that harmonization of regulatory organization, West African regulatory authority, also improve trade of pharmaceutical commodities produced locally in Nigeria within the West African region as well. Those are the opportunities that I see.
Sincerely appreciate you. Thank you so much. Distinguished participants, our time is really fast spent now, and I think it's a hard close at this point that I need to apply. So, so we can have the registrar help us wrap up. But special thanks to all my panel member, Ambassador, Mr. Akinwuntan, Mr. Lawal, Mr. Johnson, Akinyinka, and of course, Bolanle. Thank you for your insight. We sincerely do appreciate. I hope that participants were able to pick very valuable insight and learnings from the insight you've shared. Some of the questions that we probably were not able to attend to, I'm hoping that the Secretariat can help collate at the back end. And if there are some that really require you know, a fresh answer, if it's not been touched at all, I'm sure they will make arrangements to be able to reach out to attendees.